master's student here at Gallatin. I'm going to be talking about the Great Garbage Patch. I know that a lot of you here probably already know what the Great Garbage Patch is. I'm curious in the audience how many of you know what the Great Garbage Patch is. Okay. Well, it's very possible that you don't actually know what the Great Garbage Patch is, because I thought I knew what it was, and then I continued to do my research for this very program and realized that, thank you, I realized that I thought I knew, and a lot of that information actually changed. So I want to ask, what is the Great Garbage Patch? Many of you know that it is twice the size of Texas, and it's swirling in the North Pacific Ocean, in one of many oceanic gyres that exist around the world between Hawaii and the west coast of the United States. In the early 2000s, Charles Moore, the sailor who discovered the patch and has now devoted his life to studying it and educating the public, measured 6 times more plastic than plankton in the center of the gyre. Other accounts have risen as high as 10 times more plastic than plankton in the Great Garbage Patch. So I want to ask again, what is the Great Garbage Patch? Since I prefaced this by saying I thought I knew what it was, and I just described the basic description that I normally give when people ask me about it. I get really excited because I'm obsessed with the Great Garbage Patch. Well, the Great Garbage Patch is a misnomer and can be best defined by what it's not. It's not an island, as is commonly thought and illustrated here in this example. Is called the Gorilla in the Greenhouse. This is a children's show, much like Captain Planet, for those of us who grew up with that. Here they portray the Great Garbage Patch as an island of plastic bags. And they also have an evil character that has a worm in his head that wants to live on this island. Clearly not an island. For this reason, it's not a patch as much as it's a soup of broken down plastic, pieces smaller normally than a penny. The patch is also not visible by satellite, as illustrated here incorrectly, attributed on Tree Hugger and probably photoshopped. I'm not exactly sure what part of the world that's supposed to be, but it's visible just below the ocean's surface and is made of tiny broken pieces of plastic that have taken years to get there and either float or sink to the ocean floor. And for this reason, it's not visible via satellite. Because the plastics are in small pieces, they are being ingested by oceanic life and slowly moving into our world's food systems. It's also not what the media tends to show it to be. While researching for this talk, I found a fascinating trend. Most mainstream news and even some scientific journal articles, when they're anytime talking about the Great Garbage Patch, decide to show images of intact and comprehensible objects. For example, we have the Coca-Cola cap where you can actually read the Coca-Cola symbol versus the smaller pieces of plastic which are trudged up when they do the research. These photos in these articles are normally of plastic debris, aka plastic pollution, trapped along beaches that are natural entrapment areas because of nearby currents, or of entrapment cleanup efforts. So these clearly are not correct images to represent the Great Garbage Patch. So the idea of exaggeration has been a contentious point in the media around defining the Great Garbage Patch as recent as January 2011, when an oceanographer and assistant professor from Oregon State University started a media stir when she stated that the size depictions of the patch have been grossly exaggerated. Her own claims use similarly simple visual metaphors, such as the size of Texas at a fraction, based on what I just said, twice the size of Texas, right? That's the thing that most people say. Some also say that it's twice the size of the continental U.S. The size ranges clearly. And she also compares the ocean to a football field, et cetera, et cetera. These metaphors were then also oversimplified by the media in the same vein as the characteristics of the patch in all of these photos that I've shown you. In an effort to redefine what the patch was not, this professor inadvertently added to the media frenzy to define it in visual terms. So why is there such a battle over how to envision the patch? And besides the obvious reasons for disgust in response to the phenomenon, i.e. the harmful effects of pollution on our collective health, why exactly is the patch such a cultural point of contention? And more importantly, why is it so hard for us to envision the Great Garbage Patch? In this talk, I want to think about here our inability to visualize the Great Garbage Patch in space and how it's inexplicably tied to our inability to envision the patch or plastic objects in time. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we want to imagine the timeline of a typical object in our own lives, and most likely made of plastic or plastic parts. We buy and love it, and eventually, for the most part, we will throw it away. These points in the object's life cycle to us become a life and death. And what happens before or after is usually a mystery to us, and to a certain extent, not a priority in our busy day-to-day. Stating this fact isn't my way of casting judgment in ambiguous terms, and not my attempt to simply get you to care. No, I want you to think about it like this. If an object's death occurs upon the act of throwing it away, and landfills are our object's cemeteries then, designated as the appropriate location for dirty trash, then the Great Garbage Patch and other plastic soup gyres, which there are more than one, are offensive purgatories, reminding us of our past relationships with beloved plastic objects and hinting at our own mortalities being shorter than that of the objects whose lives we believe to have only lasted minutes or seconds with us. In other words, what we subconsciously or not believe to be the life and death of plastic objects are completely limited to our own timelines, not to the timelines of the objects themselves. Every piece of plastic ever made will outlive us. Put it this way, you go to a street vendor and you buy a sandwich. You unwrap the plastic and walk to the trash can to throw it out. That piece of plastic was in your life for a total of about 30 seconds, if that, but it will continue to live past you. Does it matter where it ends up, is what I want to know. And I think to our collective conscious, it absolutely does. The anthropomorphic characteristics of plastic objects are unlike others because it is a material that we discard readily, yet trust to cleanse anything it touches. Take this mind-blowing example of an artist/designer based in Manhattan who packages New York trash and sells it in plastic cubes. He took on the project as a design challenge to prove that you can sell anything as long as you have good packaging. The irony, of course, that most New York trash is packaging. So, according to this example then, plastic has an almost magic power to make even old and seemingly disgusting trash plastics new and appealing again. We can fall in love with this object if we want, and it's hard not to, isn't it? I think it's pretty beautiful. And this designer actually has an incredible site of art based on trash. So as a graphic designer and a photographer myself, I have an almost gravitational pull to basically fetishizing commodities. And as an artist, this fetishization comes through in my desire to look for the beauty in details, especially in objects and object forms. This simultaneous lust, fear, and disgust for plastics is what inspired my work on view here and now in the Gallatin galleries around the corner over there, entitled The Great Garbage Patch, and alternatively entitled Message in a Bottle. I became fascinated with this fetishization and love for both plastic materials and for the desire for complete, intact objects. In imagining the entire lifespan of each piece we may discard after once loving, I considered bringing them back to life to pull at our original emotional attachment and longing for them. Most of my friends know that if anyone ever brings up the Great Garbage Patch, I pretty much go on and on because I am sincerely obsessed with it. And as a side note, I'm here at Gallatin studying gender history. It's nothing to do with the Great Garbage Patch. This is a personal obsession of mine. And for that very reason, I'm not going to go into the finer details of the Great Garbage Patch. But if you are interested in learning more about it, you're more than welcome to go to the companion blog that I started for the series, which is simply greatgarbagepatch.com. And if you're interested in making immediate change, which personally I hate talks that just tell us how bad something is and don't give us any sort of suggestions for solution, I highly recommend the Plastic Pollution Coalition, which is taking the most direct action in regards to plastic pollutions, as well as myths of recycling plastic, because plastic can't truly be recycled, it can only be downcycled, and actions ranging from personal to legislative. So thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you.